Hi everyone. It is Memorial Day weekend. It's actually Thursday night right now, and I have the next few days off, so I've decided to do a batch of tie-dye. I have a bunch of different things that I'm planning on tie-dyeing, but I decided it would be a good idea to maybe try and do a tutorial for a tie-dye hoodie. The hoodie that I'm going to make for the tutorial is going to have a peace sign symbol on it, and I'm making this one for my aunt, so hopefully it comes out good and hopefully she likes it. The tutorial is going to be for a beginner, and I'm going to use a tie-dye kit for it, which I normally don't use. I normally buy my supplies in bulk. I buy my dyes in bulk and measure them out myself. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to show you the kit. Please feel free to share and like this video. If you have any questions or comments, please add them. I'll try my hardest to answer them all for you. And hopefully it comes out good and I can do some more tutorials for you in the future. Thanks. So this is the tie-dye kit that I would recommend for beginners. It basically has almost everything that you will need to do the tie-dye, at least your first project. It's made by Jacquard, and the colors always have came out really vibrant. It has soda ash, it has everything. I'm going to go through everything with you. But you can find it at Joann's, Michael's, any craft store usually has this brand, and you can also order it online. So inside you will find one pair of gloves, and one pair of gloves is not going to be enough for your tie-dye project, so you're definitely going to want to invest in some gloves. If you can find some that fit your hands, it's even better. The gloves that come in here, these are a lot better quality than what they used to have in the kits. They used to have a vinyl glove and they were really thin and really big. These are more of a nitrile glove, and they're still really big for my hand. I wear a size extra small in normal gloves when I do my crafting, so I'm not going to use these, but you'll definitely need more than one pair. I always use a pair when I am soaking in the soda ash, and you have to soak for 20 minutes, so I never leave them on for that long. I also use a pair when I'm dyeing and wrapping, and then I also use a pair when I'm unwrapping, because the dye will still dye your hands. Even though it's supposed to be set, it will still dye your hands. So at least 3 pairs. I usually go through a couple more than that, because normally I dye a lot of things at once, and normally I stop halfway to clean up and I take off my gloves and re-glove at that time. Or if my gloves get too much dye on them and I'm leaving fingerprints on everything, all my white fabrics, then I'll change gloves at that time too. So definitely want a few extra pairs than that. It comes with a soda ash fixer, and I use this every time I do a tie-dye, no matter what brand I'm using. You can buy this in the store separately. If you're doing a kind of, some tie-dyes kits have the fixer actually in the dye already, so they say you don't need this, but even with those, I always use this no matter what brand I'm doing. I always use it. I feel like I get way more vibrant colors if I use this than if I were to not use it. It also comes with a little bag of rubber bands. So depending on how many projects and how you're doing the ties, this might be enough for you, but I never use this. I have a big bulk bag of rubber bands that I got from the dollar store 100 years ago, and I still haven't used it all. But I always save these just in case. They're not, they're kind of small rubber bands, so they don't have a lot of stretch to them. So if you're doing bigger projects like hoodies, this is probably going to be too small. So that's about max that I would stretch it, and I don't know. I just like bigger, thicker rubber bands a lot of times for these projects. It also comes with 3 bottles of dye. So the dyes that it comes with are turquoise, fuchsia, and yellow, and they're in the squirt bottles already, the dye is. So when you're ready to mix up the dye, you basically just add water and shake it up until it dissolves, and then the dye should be ready to go. I like this method rather than the dip method of tie-dye, just because I feel like it's easier for me to get the colors where I want without everything turning muddy. The hardest part about this compared to the dip method is if you're dipping, you can just leave it in the tub until the fabric is fully saturated. With this, you kind of have to use your gloves and open up the folds to make sure that you're saturating the fabric all the way through so you don't end up with a lot of white spots. But I always use the bottles. I haven't done a dip tie-dye in a million years either. So that's everything in the kit. There are a couple other things that you're going to need for the project that I'm going to be showing you. You'll need some spare cardboard. You can use regular paper if you want for it, but definitely cardboard is easier to work with. So the cardboard is going to be to make some templates, and the templates you'll make to whatever shape you want to end up with on the tie-dye. So I have a couple of pre-cut out templates because I do this all the time. I just reuse them over and over with a heart and a peace sign. I also have a star and a couple other ones that I've done. You can make any design that you want in a template, but just make sure that it's something that you can tie-dye. If you're gonna do letters, they have to be bubble letters. Like, it can't just be a stick letter with this method. If you're gonna do some kind of folding method, then yeah, you can do basically whatever you want, but you just cut out the shape, and we're going to use this to draw on the fabric later. I always recommend doing the drawing with a pencil, not a pen. If you use a pen, it might not wash out in the wash. The pencil that I use is just regular pencil, and I've always been able to get the marks out when I do the wash. You're also going to need a needle and thread. So for the purpose of this project, I'm going to use black thread. I would definitely use whatever thread is the cheapest, because you won't be able to reuse it. You're just going to cut it when you're done. So I go through a lot of thread. Normally I use just a white cheap thread, but I want you to be able to see it in this project, so I'm going to use the black for you. You just need one needle, and I'll show you how to use that to get the designs in the project a little bit later on. You're also going to need some kind of tub for mixing the soda ash, and I usually just use a little dowel stick to mix it up. If you have a paint mixer or something, you can too. I wouldn't use a kitchen spoon or anything on this, anything that you're going to be eating with. You can maybe go to a thrift store and get a throwaway spoon for a quarter or something to mix it up. But if I'm doing a lot of tie-dye, then I'll actually just fill up my bathtub. And this won't fill up a bathtub, but I buy bulk soda ash, so if I'm doing a big batch of tie-dye, I'll fill up my bathtub and let the clothes soak in that. Otherwise, I just use a small tote and mix up enough to do whatever project I'm doing. And then you'll need a pair of scissors and whatever kind of white fabric you want to dye. I have dyed hoodies, I've dyed t-shirts, I've dyed bandanas, I've dyed baby clothes, socks, bed sheets, towels. I've dyed it all. You can dye anything that you want as long as it's white, and I recommend 100% cotton. I have dyed blends before, but sometimes if it's a blend, it won't dye the part that's blended, so you'll get more streaky colors than you would if it was 100% of anything that you're planning on dyeing. So go ahead and get all of your supplies ready, and when we come back, I will show you how to prepare the fabric for the dye. Okay, so I just went and grabbed another piece of cardboard, and I'm just going to put it in between the layers on the shirt, just so that I'm not drawing into the soft fabric. It's really hard to pick up a pencil line on. So I'm going to rearrange this and make sure that it's nice and center again. And then I'm going to go ahead and start tracing this, and you can, I don't know if you can see it yet, but it's picking up a lot better pencil marks than it did the first time. So I'm going to trace the inside and the outside, like I said, of every single part of this template. The peace sign's a little bit more intricate to work with than the heart or like any other shape. You can do this with any shape template you want. But it comes out so cool, so it's definitely worth the extra effort as far as this goes. So I'm almost done with this, and then I'm going to trace the outside of the circle. Man, this is a soft fabric. Usually the fabric holds up a little bit better to this pencil. So then we'll do the outside. It doesn't really matter how dark it is, you just have to be able to see it for the next part. So you don't have to get a real dark line. A faint line is fine as long as you're able to see it. I'm drawing all over my template. So we'll see how that looks. Yep, and that's pretty good. I'm just going to go back over this in the areas that didn't come out real dark, just to make sure that I don't rub them off when with my hands, just removing the fabric. So I don't know if you can see that real well, but it's just a pencil line outline of the peace sign. So the next thing we're going to do is get the needle and thread ready. We're going to need, I always use more thread than what I actually need on it. I'm going to keep the cardboard in here for this part. And so I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle with probably about a foot of thread. I'm going to use it 2-ply, so it'll actually be about 2 feet with the needle in the middle of it. So I'll be right back. Okay, so I have my needle threaded, and I have about a foot of thread. I have no knots in this. I'm not going to tie any knots at all with any of this thread until we're actually done with all of the threading part, all of the sewing part. So this is enough to do one of these small triangles. I'm going to use a separate piece of thread for this triangle, and then a separate piece of thread for this pie piece, a separate piece of thread for this piece, and then a separate piece of thread to go around the outside. And I am definitely not a seamstress, and I'm not sure exactly what this stitch is called, but I'm basically just going to go in and out right along the line that I drew. So I'm only going to do this piece right now. So just work your thread around, and I usually do one side at a time. So see how it's like that? So I'm going to go around the whole thing like this, and I'm not going to pull anything tight until I have all of my pieces sewn up. Okay, so there's how that looks, and then I'm going to finish the last side of this little triangle, and when I come out the end, I'm going to try and get real close to where I was with the beginning of that thread. So see how I just came out right there? So I have a little knot. That happens a lot. Try and unknot this because I don't want any knots in my thread. I've never used this thread before, but see how that was all knotted up right there? I don't want it knotted up. I want it nice and smooth. So that should be fine. So I'm going to cut this, and then I'm going to do the same thing for this triangle and for these little pie pieces. So I'm going to cut it. I'll be right back. Okay, I have my second piece on my needle. It's about the same size as my first one, and I'm going to do the small triangle again on this side. So it doesn't matter where you start and end, just as long as you start and end at the same spot. You'll see why when we pull these tight. And you can probably be better at measuring the amount of thread that you need than I am. I always use more just because I like to wrap it around at the end, But basically you need about 2 times plus a little bit more than the whole outline, the length of the outline. So I always cut a little bit more than I need. So the small ones go the fastest. The big circle always takes a little bit longer. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to all of these circles, or all, they're not circles, all of these little pieces, and then I'll do the big circle, and I'll come back when all of my thread is in place. So okay, so I have all of the thread in place, and I'm going to show you how to tie it off. I always start with the smaller pieces first to do the tie, so I don't know if you can see this okay. I threaded all of them. I left the little tails, so that the tails are what I'm going to pull. So I always start with the 2 smaller pieces because those are going to be the ones that are going to bunch up the most on you when you pull them tight. So just separate the tails a little bit here, and then I'm going to start with this one here. And so I always go underneath the fabric and kind of push up with my finger while I'm pulling the thread. So I'm basically making it I always wrap it around a couple times. That's why I leave a little bit of extra tail. So that's the smallest little piece. And then I'm going to tie it off with the rubber band. The rubber bands that came in the kit are fine for this part. But once we get into the rest of the tying, I don't use them for that. So if you want to use them for this, you can. Smaller rubber bands are better for this part. So that's the first one. And you'll see why in a minute why it's important to do the smaller ones first, because you can kind of see how it's bunching up here. You want to make sure that you keep these all separate. And we're going to dye them separate once we do the dyeing process. You'll kind of see how that goes too. So I'm going to pull this one tight and then wrap it around a couple times again. See, I'm not knotting it at all. Grab another rubber band. So I'm going to have 4 little bumps like this, and 2 of them are going to be bigger than the others. So they're all going to get dyed basically the same way. So those are the 2 smaller bumps. And now I'm going to pull tight the 2 bigger bumps. Or the 2 bigger pie pieces, however, but see how my fingers are in here, making sure that the fabric is, if you don't put your fingers in there, sometimes the fabric will get bunched in there, and I don't like to do that because that'll really muddy it up when you go to do the dyeing part. So make sure that it's all on the same side. And one more, and then we'll do the big circle. The big circle I might have to go get a different rubber band for. I'm not sure if my rubber bands here are going to be big enough for or not. And so one more. So those are inside of my, these are going to be all the same color when I dye them, all 4 of these. That'll be the inside circle of my peace sign. So now I'm going to find the tail for my outside circle and pull that tight. Yeah, I think the big ones will be. And this part is more why I use the two ply of thread. If you only use one ply, I've had the thread break on me, so that's why I use 2 ply. So you pull it real tight, and I always wrap around just to give me a guide for where the rubber band's gonna go. So it doesn't matter that those threads are hanging off because it'll dye all the same. The threads aren't going to dye at all, but they won't be in the way at all. You'll see once we get to that part. So okay, so this is the basically the way that the peace sign looks when you're tie-dyeing it. So if you want it to look pretty uniform, these 4 outside bumps are all going to be dyed the same color, and my aunt wants this blue and red or pink, so we're going to use the turquoise and the fuchsia for this. I normally do the pink in the middle and the blue in the outside, but I think I'm going to do it opposite this time just because I normally don't do it like that, so I'm going to do something different. And then this inside part, basically from this rubber band, all of this is going to be the same color. And this part right here, excluding the 4 bumps, this part is going to make up the peace sign. So whatever color you want the peace sign to be, that's what color you dye this part. And you just want to make sure, see, I didn't tie it too tight, so I'll be able to get in all of the little folds and stuff once I am doing the dyeing process. So the rest of this, you can decide. Sometimes I do a swirl with the rest of it. I think I'm just going to do a starburst pattern because this is a zip-up hoodie. It's a little bit harder to get a good swirl with the zipper on it than it would be for a regular hoodie. But a starburst pattern is basically just taking the peace sign and pulling up from there and wrapping rubber bands all the way along it. What I like to do with hoodies, I like the sleeves to look the same. So I'm going to kind of pull the sleeves up and pull the sleeves together. And I'm going to wrap the sleeves at the same time before I wrap the rest of this, because I want both of the sleeves to look exactly the same. It'll just look like a better product when you're done. So I'm going to wrap both of the sleeves together at exactly the same length, and then I'll do the same with the hood, and then I'll do the rest of the hoodie. So I will come back after I've done that. Okay, so just to revisit, we have the peace sign here. I've tied off the sleeves, and I basically just did single rubber bands all the way down. I did the same thing with the hood. This one I twisted a little bit. I've never done that before, so hopefully it turns out okay, especially since it's for my aunt. But basically what I'm going to do with the rest is take bigger rubber bands and basically just section it off exactly the same way that I did with this. I'm just going to pull up from the peace sign and do circles all the way down until I get to the very bottom. So I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done with that. Okay, so I have the hoodie all tied off. You'll kind of see it kind of looks like an octopus without as many legs, but it's got a lot of little, I guess, legs coming from it. The main part is that I made it all even. So the bottom, this is the bottom seam. It's all going to be together. It's all going to be the same color, so it'll look nice and even all the way up in parallel. I actually saw on here, which is something that I didn't look at before, my aunt sent me this hoodie, but it's 60% polyester, 40% cotton. So I'm hoping this will dye okay. I dyed a 50-50 poly cotton tie-dye hoodie before and it dyed just fine. So I'm hoping this will dye okay, but it's going to be kind of an experiment for everything. So this is all tied and ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to get the ash, the soda ash mixture ready. And when I have that in the bathroom, I will go ahead and turn back on the video. The directions, if you read the directions that come with the tie-dye kit, it tells you actually to soak it before you tie. And you can do either way. The first time I did a tie-dye, I soaked it before I tie-dyed because I had never done it before and I didn't know any better. But every time after, I feel like it's easier to tie it when it's dry and then soak it. I'm just going to soak it for a little bit longer than 20 minutes like it says. So I will come back when I'm getting ready to do the soda ash.